So next on the list is to deal with the create activity, and at the moment we can't even open our form, so we've got a couple of things to do here. And let's go into our activity store, and just below our load activities, let's add an action to create an activity. So I'm going to say action, and we'll just say create activity, and we'll need to pass in our activity here, which is going to be an iActivity. And we want to add our loading indicator here as well, so we're going to need an observable, and we'll call it submitting equals false initially, and inside our create activity we'll say this.submitting equals true, and then we'll add our try catch block, and we'll also make this an async method actually, and we'll say try catch and error. And if we take a look at what we're doing inside our app for this, what we're doing is using agent activities create activity, and then we're setting our activities, we're setting the selected activity to the activity, and then we're setting the edit mode back to false. And then we turn off the submitting indicator. So we're pretty much going to be doing the same thing again. So I'm just going to copy the agent activities create into my activity store, and I'll just say await and then paste this in. Now we're not using anything that we get back from the API in this method. We're generating the GUID on the client side, so our activity here is going to have everything that we need for our activity. We're not relying on anything we're getting back from the server. So after we've created the activity, what we want to do then is we want to push this new activity into our activities array. So we'll say list.activities.push, and then we'll pass in the activity, and then we'll turn off the edit mode, and we'll set this to false, and then we'll turn off the submitting, and we'll say list.submitting equals false, and we'll also copy this and paste it into our catch, and we'll also log any error in the console. And what we also need is a method to open our activity form when we click on the button. So I'll create another action, and I'll just call this one open create form. That takes no parameters, and we'll just say list.edit mode equals true, and we'll also set the selected activity back to undefined. So with these two methods in place, we should be able to go ahead and actually create an activity now. So let's head over to, first of all, our navbar so that we can make use of the open create form method. And then we'll go to our activity form and use this create activity method. So let's start with the navbar. And this is not connected to our activity store at all at the moment, so let's bring this in, and we'll say const activity store equals use context and activity store, and I'll just import this. So I'll import activity store from app and stores and activity store, and all we want to use this for is simply to open our create form. So I'll just say activity store.open create form, and whilst we don't necessarily need it now, we'll do later on, so I'm just going to make this an observer at the same time and just wrap this around the navbar. And what we can do then is we can also remove the props that we're passing in here, because we don't need these anymore. So I'm just going to remove the interface completely. I can remove the destructured open create form, and I can also remove the iProps in this case as well. We don't strictly need this anymore, but it doesn't do any harm to keep it in place, so I'm just going to leave it there. And then we can go up to our app components and remove the property that we're passing down here. So I'll remove the open create form. And that also means we can remove the handle open create form here, And we can also remove the handle select activity because this is no longer in use either. Starting to reduce the amount of code in our app component. I'm starting to feel a little bit better about this. So let's go to our activity form next, and we'll first of all need to bring in our activity store inside here. And we've got quite a lot going on in our form at the moment. So I'm just going to add the activity store at the top. So I'm going to say const activity store equals use context and say activity store, and once again bring this in manually. So import activity store from and go up to the app and stores and activity store. And what we need here is just the create activity. So I'll just destructure this and I'll say const equals activity store and just bring in the create activity and then remove this from our activity form, remove it from the interface as well. And this also means I can remove it from my activity dashboard. So I'll get rid of the create activity here, and I can also then remove it from the activity dashboard and also remove it from the props inside here and head all the way back up to the app components and also remove it from my activity dashboard. And that means I can also remove the handle create activity inside here as well. So in the activity form, because I've destructured this and we're using it inside our handle submits, this should just work as it was before. So let's go and take a look to make sure that is the case. And if I click on create activity, first of all we see our form is open, which is good. And I'm just going to create a new activity called test_mobx. I'll give it a category so that we do at least see an image when we submit this, and give it a date and time. Now I'm picking the 11th of July here, and in theory this should locate itself between past activity 2 and future activity 1, but we haven't done anything with the dates yet, so it won't do. It's going to appear at the bottom of the list, and if I click on submit, well, the activity form disappears, which is a good sign, and we can see our newly created activity at the bottom of this list. But this isn't quite what we're looking for. What we want is this to appear in our activity list in date order. So what we'll take a look at next is another feature of MobX, which is computed properties, and we'll sort our dates on the client side so that when we do create a new activity, it appears in the correct place. And we'll look at that next.